That's either $100 or $150 depending on the exam. The school has to pay for resources to provide that testing, right? The school has to pay the teacher the $50 because that's in the law, $50 per student who gets who passes the test. So all of that adds up, and then the rest can be spent on things that directly support the students who generated those funds. Now, that is a little bit ambiguous, and somebody figured that out, that there's this large amount of discretion at the local level. Now, I've been immersed in Florida education politics for 15 years, and I heard over and over again, local control, local control, local control. It doesn't get any more local than the actual school, right? The school gets to make a decision on how we support those students. Now, that could be professional learning for the teachers that teach them. That could be resources for the students themselves that are tangible. It could be a lot of different things. But because it's a little bit ambiguous and because there's a high level of discretion, they don't like it in Tallahassee. They like to centralize power. They like to centralize control of the money. So what they did was they're proposing to cut that money in half, add $62 to the base student allocation, and then claim the money's following the students.
Jarrett.
Oh, yes, yes. So
How'd I do, Jarrett?
that was good.
All right,
that
good.
was good. So what I also want to bring to people's attention, I want to clear up some of the misconceptions that people have because I'm also aware of what he just said. They tend to throw around a lot of words. They're just words that kind of get people feeling a certain kind of way.
Right.
But the first one that I already cleared up was the money should follow the student. That one is the first one that's clearly that's just not something they actually care about. It's something they use to justify these awful things. But another thing that they're saying, another reason why that doesn't make any sense is because they want to change. Also, a part of this is to change the way the schools are funded for these programs. It's no longer going to be $852 per student in the school. It's going to be $852 per the estimated number of students in the school. So to explain that to everybody who's listening, our school could have 1,000 students next year, but they could estimate that we're only going to have 950 because that's what we have now. We'd get $852 times 950 instead of 852 times 1,000. That leaves us with a 50 students that are completely unfunded.
Mm-hmm.
That can be detrimental to a school because now you have 50 students that's 2 classes worth of students. So that's 2 class periods for 8 subjects that are completely unfunded. And there's no way that logically, it doesn't make any sense how there wouldn't be any sort of tangible or visible changes with that much loss of funding. There's just no way. And also, as my Dylan over here said about Kevin Carrico, who said that the programs won't be canceled. Okay, if they're not canceled, they'll still be cut. That's the point that everybody needs to understand. They'll still be cut. And any cut right now would be detrimental because we're already on the brink of not having enough money as is. Our principal actually told us a few weeks ago when we were talking to him that ever since our school switched from being a normal traditional high school to a magnet school, it took them 4 years just to break even on all of the additional costs of these programs because they weren't getting the correct funding.
Right.
So,
And Wolfson actually has like kind of a 501c3 to
yes,
help fill
exactly.
some of those gaps already because there is
And it's
not
still-
enough
yeah,
funding.
and it still took us 4 years.
I want to take a call from Cody on the South Side. Good morning, Cody. Go ahead.
Good morning. I would just like to talk about how detrimental these cuts would be to me as an IB student in the IB program. The rest of my high school is basically dependent on the funding that we get from this. Is a lot of the money our school receives is from this funding, and without that, it would be a huge loss for the rest of my high school career. With having my eyes set on prestigious colleges that I won't get into, because all of this funding, it like helps me out so much, and I don't understand how cutting it would be a good idea.
Cody, thanks so much. Appreciate you calling in today. We also have a call from Michael on the South Side. Good morning, Michael. Go ahead.
Hi. So I also go to that same school that Cody, Jarrett, and Dylan all go to. One main concern here as well is that, as Jarrett mentioned, we barely have enough funding to get by. If you look at our news headlines recently, we've already had schools close and merge. So if we keep taking away funding, how are we supposed to support our educational system for future generations, let alone currently?
Thank you, Michael. We also have a call from Tommy on the North Side. Good morning, Tommy. Go ahead.
Hi. I was just calling to kind of double down on what one of the students was saying. Congressman Carrico, I believe, had said that that everything was fine, and that this was
Council
just
member
political gains.
Carrico. Yeah, Council member
Councilman,
Carrico.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
And I just wanted to say, if you look at the bill, Senate Bill 7030, it has changed a good bit. If you look at the most current version of the bill, they've actually taken out the portions with AP, IB, et cetera, and they've moved it over to amending a separate component. It's like a statute 1011.62, but it's not very clear at all to somebody who's trying to look at this thing and figure out what they're doing. And I think that convolutedness on top of this push to kind of defund public schooling, the optics aren't good if you're going to sit there and say everything's fine. So that was all I wanted to say.
All right. Thank you.
That's the point.
Go ahead,
I'm allowed
Anna.
to add on that, to kind of build what that last caller just said. A lot of what these legislators do is they make it that convoluted so that the regular citizen doesn't understand. They allow for, like, kids who this is actually affecting, for us to not understand it. And it takes someone who's read policy before, like us, to really delve deep into where this is going, what's happening with it. And they're brainwashing the regular public into thinking, oh, this will be fine with the way they word things. And the reality is it's not. They're twisting their words, they're twisting the legislation, and they're hurting everyone in the process.
Well, I want to ask you about your response. I mean, we've been talking about the city council, which doesn't actually, other than this proposed resolution, doesn't really have any authority on this matter. But I'm curious about the response that you've gotten from lawmakers in Tallahassee. I mean, we reached out specifically to 3 local lawmakers, Wyman Duggan, Clay Yarbrough, Tracy Davis, to get their take on this proposal. We haven't heard back from any of them, but what have you heard back?
So we during class actually, so our principal sent out a mass email because nobody knew about this until after it was being
couple
passed.
days before.
A couple days before, to where they're all in session, so we couldn't even really reach them. But we sent emails, got auto-generated response from Tallahassee. We called them, they wouldn't pick up the phone. They said they're secretaries or people that answer the phone for them would say, oh, they'll give you a call back or something like that, but they won't give you a call back. They won't listen to any voices that aren't for them. And it's really an eye-opening experience. Even in your local, even in the city council, they wouldn't listen to our voices. And Kevin Carco, when I actually talked to him, he said, why don't y'all go to the school board meetings and talk about this? Why don't you call representatives and all that stuff? And I told him that they don't respond. They don't listen to us. And even the school board don't listen to us. So if our own city council, our school board, our representatives don't listen to us, it just is terrible. And I also want to say that the voters that vote for these representatives, even if you're retired, which most of the people in Florida are, and this doesn't directly affect you, please be on our side for this. Please do your research onto this, watch the news about stuff like this, and don't vote for these representatives who voted for this to happen. I mean, it doesn't really affect most of the people. Well, I wouldn't say most of the people, but a large portion of the people in Florida. And because of it not doing that, these people that are retired, they don't care. They just will vote for somebody who will lower their property taxes. And it's terrible that they don't care about the voice of students. They don't care about the voice of people who might not be the absolute majority or might not be the easy vote to get in Florida. And Kevin Carco showed me that he even said himself that, which I believe is a complete lie. With all due respect to him, I think he lied to me when I was talking to him in the green room. I asked him, so what? But if y'all got this resolution, y'all could the state representatives will have to listen to this, or they'll at least be able to see their support of the programs. He told me that no, we would probably just get the same auto-generated responses y'all do, which is just not true. You're the city council of a city in their state, and I think it's ridiculous that he tried to act like I wouldn't know my facts when he was in the green room. He acted like the kids wouldn't know what we're talking about, or even anybody that was there. It's ridiculous. I mean, I even questioned his logic on it, because why would there not be teachers or anybody at the city council meeting clarifying that we're wrong on this? Why was there only people saying how terrible this is, how detrimental it is for all these students? And why is there no media coverage clarifying this? Why was there no media coverage of this bill before it was already in Tallahassee, or even that this was brewing? It's ridiculous, and I think it's terrible.
I'll answer that question. The reason why there's none of that is because it's not actually happening. And all of this is a part of a broader scheme to, if you look at the next bills that they have accompanying this one, it's all a part of a broader scheme to destroy public education. And there's nobody to support them on this. That's the reason why they have to say all these things, and they expect people to just go home and just listen to it. But that's why we're here, because, we're trying to tell people the truth. And we went to the city council because we felt like they would be able to give us the voice that we needed, because our messages were falling on deaf ears. And why it's important for everybody to be concerned with this, even retirees, everybody across the city, whether you have students in the programs or not, because this affects our workforce as well. If we don't have people who are highly educated or trained to do ECT programs, you don't have to go to college, trained in vocations. If we don't have those things, we're not going to have a competitive job market.
And I want to add one more thing, because I know our time is getting to an end. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is bipartisan.
Yes.
And Senate Bill 7030, only 2 people voted no. That means like almost the entire Florida Senate agrees that they think that Florida education should be cut. And I have friends who are known for, being more right-leaning, friends who are being more left-leaning. And we're all fighting our school boards, the state. It's not. Don't let them tell you it's an anti-Republican bill. It is not.
It's not.
It's
Oh,
bipartisan. And
yeah.
Rory Gilmore, not Rory Gilmore. I do apologize. Rory Diamond. He tweeted last night that we were trying to attack the Republicans in Tallahassee, which is just absolutely not true. We are fighting for our access to education.
Let me also note, just for 1 second, that Kevin Carco, I think it was specifically Karen Carco and Roy Diamond. I think it was specifically more Karen Carco, but there was a girl who went on the podium and was trying to express how she now is like close to being certified to being like a biomedical person. And she was expressing her emotions, and she even started crying. And she said, "Why won't my city councilman? Why won't y'all look at me?" Called them out by name. "Why won't you just look at me?" Because our city councilmen were on their phones, walking out, not paying attention, looking down. I think Roy Diamond was bouncing in his chair while these children were giving important things, trying to express how important these programs are for them and how detrimental they are. They looked all through these bills, but they didn't even give her the respect to look her in her eyes when she begged them to while crying on the podium.
And
I think we need to know all this stuff about our city council.
And Jared, just in the last seconds that we have,
I just want to read this awful tweet that our elected official tweeted last night after droves of students came to the city council to express our disapproval. He said, "Grateful the Jacks Council shot down this latest effort to divert our attention from city business to attack Republicans in Tallahassee." Now, I would say
painful cause infertility, and in as many as half of the women that have it. But endometriosis remains a mysterious and incurable disorder. Here to talk about risk factors, available treatments, and resources are 4 experts in the subject. Tam Carter, who has endometriosis and is a fertility advocate. Good morning, Tam.
Good morning.
Dr. Chandra Adams, an OBGYN and women's healthcare expert. Good morning, Dr. Adams.
Good morning.
Dr. Paulami Guha, endometriosis specialist and surgeon. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Dr. Linda Fuad, endometriosis specialist. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Adams, you have referred to this as the inside-out disease. What is endometriosis?
So, just like you said, inside out. So, the inside of the uterus has a certain type of tissue. And endometriosis is when that tissue somehow makes its way outside of the uterus and implants on other organs like bladder and bowel, and can travel really as far as the liver and the lungs, and creates a hormonally active situation where the woman is not just bleeding from the lining of her uterus, but from all of those implants that are in different areas of the body.
And that can be extraordinarily painful.
Absolutely. And it can cause other symptoms too. So depending on what organ it implants, like if it's in an area where there's a lot of nervous activity, it can cause severe pain and disruptions to the nervous system and referred pain in other areas of the body.
Dr. Fouad, this can be difficult to diagnose. Why is that? I mean, obviously can be a very painful condition, but it doesn't always manifest the same in everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's endometriosis and adenomyosis, and the symptoms can vary from abnormal uterine bleeding, pelvic pain, and sometimes infertility. And it depends on the patient's kind of reception of pain as well. So the symptoms do vary, which makes it also hard to diagnose. but it is pretty prevalent. Sometimes up to 80% of women can have it, but the average is about 30 to 35% of women.
And what are the symptoms that typically present when somebody is getting a diagnosis
With adenomyosis?
with either?
Okay. So they're pretty distinct. Sometimes they coexist. But for adenomyosis, as far as symptoms, patients typically present with very heavy, painful periods. So it's not uncommon that my patients tell me, well, I thought I just should live in this pain. Like periods are supposed to be painful, you know, kind of suffering through their cycles every month. It's just that breaks my heart because typically those are patients that shouldn't be normalizing pain. We shouldn't be normalizing pain and suffering in the first place. It just takes a diagnosis of exclusion just to kind of find out what's going on.
And just to be clear, adenomyosis, as she was saying, is where those same glands from the lining of the uterus make their way into the muscle tissue of the uterus.
So they're sort of growing inside the wall of the uterus instead of inside
Exactly.
the body.
And so when they're having periods, they are literally bleeding into the wall of the uterus. And if you've ever bruised a muscle before, it's very painful and it disrupts the way that the uterus empties and contracts and causes their cycles to be longer. The uterus kind of, it's like adding water to a sponge. It gets puffy and large, and the women bleed excessively.
Tam Carter, you have a diagnosis of endometriosis and you have gone on to become an advocate and a fertility advocate as well. How were you first diagnosed and how did your symptoms present?
I was first diagnosed in 1999. I just went to my doctor one day because I was literally tired of every month being in pain. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school, was just debilitated. And so when I presented this to my doctor, he immediately took action and did testing. And then the testing, we did a laparoscopy. And that's when I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis.
And stage 4, can you explain to us a little bit about, I mean, that's on a 4-stage scale. What does that mean, practically speaking?
That is
So stage 4 endometriosis depends upon where the endometriosis are deposited. So usually if it's on the bowel, on the ovary, there are ligaments at the back of the uterus, it automatically makes it stage 4. So it depends upon the number of sites where endometriosis can be found. So, like how Dr. Adams mentioned, it can be in the liver, lungs. I have a patient who has it in her heart also, cardiac endometriosis. So
Wow.
those things are automatically stage 4. But it is interesting that stage 4 doesn't mean that they will have the maximum pain. Now, stage 4 does mean that it will have the maximum effect on fertility, but not pain. Like, in my practice, I actually see more pain in stage 1 to 2 patients because I think the nerve involvement is more. Sometimes stage 4 doesn't always know also. The surgeries are extremely difficult because we call it like a frozen pelvis where everything is like all stuck together. And there are vital organs like bladder, ureter, which can be involved also.
And that's because this tissue creates adhesions
Adhesions,
between
yes.
different organs or
Yes.
between tissues.
Yes, because this is like an inside out disease. These tissues are also bleeding when you are on your period. So the bleeding from the uterus is coming out, but this inflammation or bleeding from this endometriotic deposit in the pelvis is just been there. So that causes inflammation and scarring. So one of the treatment that we suggest, of course, according to our AGL organization, we always say like surgical excision is the best way to take care of it, but then you have to do a maintenance to prevent recurrence, which is usually like stopping the period with like birth control pill. You can temporarily do like, hormone blockers to like stop the period, like temporarily put into the menopause. But that is usually not a solution for patients who are going to try for pregnancy. So it is interesting that pregnancy also helps because pregnancy stops your period. So usually when I do these surgeries, I say try to get pregnant in the next year because that's the best time to get pregnant because there is still a high recurrence rate if you are young because all those estrogen will trigger this endometriosis to grow again.
It is extraordinary. And those I know are difficult surgeries, that can be very wide ranging. Dr. Adams, when you are dealing with patients, what do you typically tell them about their prognosis for improvement?
So, the first thing is just setting expectations that it's a chronic condition that we're just going to manage until you're able to get definitive treatment. It's not something that we can cure, unfortunately. And some people, their recurrence, as Dr. Guha was saying, is slower. So they may feel like they were cured after an excellent clean out surgery, as she and Dr. Fuad also do. But it will come back until they are menopausal. And so just setting the expectations and determining what their goals are. If they desire childbearing, again, trying to time it as close to after the surgery as possible. If they know, like, we get into the real details of their life. Okay,
Mm.
I'm getting engaged and I know we're going to start for having a baby around 6 months after we're married. Okay, let's put you on medication until you get through the wedding, and then we'll plan the surgery for, 3 months after you've been married. I mean, it really gets into the details of how people live their lives, and it
Correct.
can dictate so many things about it.
Let's talk a little bit about the fertility aspect. How does this, Dr. Fuad, interrupt fertility? And is it a permanent state? Is it reversible? Is it a definitive, impairment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I was fortunate enough to do a minimally invasive GYN surgery fellowship practice and then enter into the infertility world where we all practice infertility, but I was kind of firsthand doing egg retrievals and transfers
Mhm.
at a fertility center. So I kind of saw the fertility aspect of it. So both endometriosis and adenomyosis, kind of, we think of them as two distinct diseases. They are not typically reversible. But basically, like we were talking about, we manage the symptoms. And it's important to make that distinction between fertility sparing and non fertility sparing, depending on the patient's desires. So, as far as fertility, we think it all starts with how the lining, with adenomyosis specifically, how the lining receives or is receptive to an embryo.
Mm.
Because it happens at like a microscopic molecular level where those tissues in the endometrial lining kind of don't mature well, or there's impairment in how they kind of develop, where they kind of, we call it invagination into the muscle layer. So there's a lot of like localized inflammation and just abnormal tissue.
Mhm.
So when it comes to fertility, sometimes that, you can ovulate, you can form an embryo, but it doesn't really implant properly. So there are treatments, sometimes it's medical management to kind of suppress that inflammation, whether it's with hormones or with estrogen blockers. Sometimes we do have to do surgery where we would locally resect an adenomyoma, for example, and that, sometimes we do it through a wedge resection.
Is that like removing when you say
Right,
resection?
right. You kind of like resect local areas of the lining or of the uterus that are affected the most by adenomyosis.
And so that's a problem with implantation. Do you also see circumstances where that tissue that gets outside of the uterine lining is also on the fallopian tubes or on the ovaries themselves, preventing them from
Yeah,
ovulating?
yeah. So, you know, we do a lot of surgeries with the IVF or fertility group. So usually stage 1 and 2 endometriosis, which is usually mostly on the peritoneal lining, does not affect the IVF success rate, but stage 3 and 4 does. So usually these cases present with something called like hydrosalpinx, sometimes where the fallopian tubes are just dilated and not working, they're blocked because of the scarring from endometriosis. Or if they have like big ovarian implants, which we call ovarian endometrioma or chocolate cyst, they won't be able to retrieve the eggs because there's not enough space.
Mm.
But also the downside of surgery is like when we are removing this ovarian endometrioma, we are also decreasing the egg reserve because the endometriotic cysts are not like true simple cysts that you just pop the cyst and is fine. The cyst is actually made up of like true ovarian tissue. So when I'm removing the cyst, you are actually removing a part of the ovarian tissue.
Wow.
And the other problem, so endometriosis, I think I still do a very good job of like clearing everything up, sending them back for IVF. The problem with adenomyosis is most of the time it's diffuse, meaning it's like all through the muscle of the uterus. You can't basically do much about it. There are some investigational surgeries, but they don't work that well unless it's like a blob of endometriosis, which Dr. Ford was saying, like adenomyoma, which you can easily remove. but most of the time it's diffuse. So as she mentioned, it decreases the receptivity of the eggs. So usually after surgery, we put them on Lupron, or like a hormone blocker, for a few months for the tissues to regress, and then they go for IVF.
Tam, we've got just about 30 seconds. Can you just, for people who are experiencing some of these symptoms or interested in getting treatment, what would you tell them from your experience?
Take action and come up with a plan. Get with your doctor or whoever your healthcare provider may be, and sit down and come up with a plan and know your goals for your future.
Yeah, well, it's such an important, information. I thank you all for sharing your wisdom on it. Really appreciate it. And Tam Carter, Dr. Chandra Adams, Dr. Paulami Guha, and Dr. Lena Fuad, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
All right. Up next, walkers lace up their shoes to make children's wishes come true.
Let's play.
As the crack of the bat echoes across blooming fields, Film at WJCT Studios presents a heartwarming celebration of America's favorite pastime. April 30th, we're hosting a special screening of EFIS, a charming indie gem that captures the spirit of community, nostalgia, and the magic of the game. With humor and heart, EFIS is a tender tribute to the game, the people who play it, and the moments that make life meaningful. Visit WJCT.org/film for tickets.
On the next Fresh Air, Oscar-nominated filmmaker Ryan Coogler. His films include both Black Panther movies and Creed. His latest, Sinners, was #1 at the box office this weekend and received rave reviews. It's a vampire thriller about twins, both played by Michael B. Jordan, opening a juke joint in Jim Crow, Mississippi. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
After Harvard University refused to comply with demands from the White House, the school faced more than $2 billion in federal funding cuts in retaliation.
I had received notice that even this year's funding was canceled, effective immediately.
I'm Deborah Becker. The clash between President Trump and higher education. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
In Washington, a blockbuster antitrust trial threatens to break up Mark Zuckerberg's $1.3 trillion empire. His company Meta denies Facebook engaged in a buyer-Berry scheme to conquer its rivals. The FTC says Meta's monopoly power is bad for competition and the economy. We break down this make-or-break moment for big tech next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, from modest requests to seemingly impossible dreams, the Make-A-Wish Foundation is celebrating more than 500,000 wishes granted, and it's raising funds to grant more. Here to tell us about an upcoming event is Cindy Craig Johnson, Assistant General Counsel at CSX and Board Chair for the Make-A-Wish Central and Northern Florida region. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning.
So how did you get involved in the Make-A-Wish Foundation in the first place?
I attended an event, Handbags for Happy Hours, which was a women's empowerment fundraising event, and heard from a Wish family, and I was very touched by their story. A child's illness affects not only that child, but their parents, their siblings, and it's so heartwarming to feel how a Wish strengthens family bonds, gives them the opportunity to get away from the concerns of hospital treatments and spend quality time together, enjoying something special for all of them.
What was it about that story that moved you in such a way?
At that point, I had young children. I'm blessed by healthy children, but it was unthinkable to imagine as a family and as a parent having to face that sort of hardship and concern, and how you keep your family together and keep those family ties during such a difficult time. Was very impactful for me.
They are very heartrending stories often. And, the children are not always at end of life, but they often are. But regardless, they're facing some really dire diagnoses.
Well, childhood cancer rates and other treatments have become so effective that oftentimes we're happy to say that a lot of our WISH kids do get through their illness. And in fact, many of them come back as WISH alum and support Make-A-Wish. It's really wonderful when we have WISH families that come back and give back to the community and to the organization, paying it forward.
And what do you hear from them about how it impacted them when they were at that stage?
Well, I'm so humbled by the stories that we hear from our WISH families. It's very individual for each of them, but without fail, they say that there's so much power to the WISH. It helps the child who's coping with an illness get through their treatments because they want to be well and enjoy their WISH. It helps their siblings get some attention from their parents and their family because they have time away together.
We often think about how this benefits the kids, but I think that for parents who are watching their kids go through something like this, it must just be immensely rewarding for them to see their kids have an opportunity to just have joy and really, have something that they've been longing for fulfilled.
Absolutely. When you think about how agonizing it must be as a parent to watch your child go through something and be suffering, I know it's so fulfilling for them, and they're so grateful when their wishes are granted.
And so the wishes are not free, and so this is a big fundraising effort. This is an annual walk that the local region does. Can you tell us a little bit about the event that's coming up?
Yes, the event celebrates wishes that have already been granted in our community, at the same time focused on raising funds so that our local Make-A-Wish chapter can continue to grant future wishes. And Walk for Wishes, which is on May 2nd at the Seawalk Pavilion in Jacksonville Beach, is a wonderful family and pet-friendly community event. We'll be joined by WISH families, by volunteers, by local businesses, and donors. There's plenty of fun activities, live entertainment, lots of great food choices. This year we have Topgolf joining us. Jackson DeVille and the Roar of the Jaguars will be there. Airbrush art and main event. So it's just a fun time for families to get out and get together. And our walk is somewhat distinctive in that it's on a Friday evening. So it's a great way to kick off the weekend with family and friends and enjoy a walk on the beach.
And are people who participate in kind of raising money as a walker with sponsorships? How does that work?
Yes, we have teams of walkers that are coming and raising money. Some are associated with organizations. I have a CSX team coming, and some are just volunteers who are supporters of Make-A-Wish. And then we will have a lot of volunteers there showing people the course and cheering everyone along and making sure that everyone has a great time.
So if people are interested in donating or participating, what's the best way to find out more info?
So you can visit our website, www.jackswalkforwishes.com. And even if you Google Jacksonville Walk for Wishes, I think you'll get to the right place.
Excellent. Well, Cindy Craig Johnson, appreciate the work that you're doing for the organization. And thanks so much for coming on today to tell us about it.
Well, we love the Make-A-Wish mission and always happy to talk about it and think of ways to increase awareness and support.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And that's our program. Thank you for listening, especially to those of you who called in today or emailed. We always welcome your feedback and suggestions. You can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight. You can also find our entire archive on the WJCT.org website or your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow when we talk about a proposed state law that could impact everything from STD testing for teens to how neighborhoods improve themselves. I'm Ann Schindler, and you've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News.
Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives.